name's Toni and I run Tiger Green Textiles, which is a recycling project, and today I'm going to show you how to make cushion covers. First of all, I'm going to introduce you to a little bit of kit. There is a good, sturdy, trusty meter rule. That's great for doing your patterns and any nice long edges. One of my favourite bits of kit is a metal square. Gives you a perfect right angle. It's great for making all sorts of things, not just those based on a square, such as a cushion or a bag, but they're useful for everything. You've probably not got one of those at home, but you may have something like that. That will again give you your right angle. If you're now looking at the screen thinking, but I haven't got any of those bits of kit, get creative. Get a book or a record or anything that has a proper right angle on it. That can give you your right angle. Then we've got some chalk so we can mark it up. Again, not the end of the world if you haven't got chalk. Use a pencil or a pen. Just be a bit careful that you don't see that on the finished item. The other thing is a nice good pair of dressmaking scissors. I use big shears because I do and I like them and I've always used them, but you can use smaller dressmaking scissors as long as they cut fabric nicely. And the other thing for checking is always to have a nice tape measure too. Okay, so that's the kit we're going to use to mark up our fabric for the cushion. When you're laying up fabric, the most important thing to do is to get your selvage edges together neatly so that your fabric lies properly true and flat. Now when you've got a pattern in the fabric, it actually makes it a little bit easier, because as long as your pattern edges are together, so here we've got a stripe in the fabric. Okay, so we're going to line those up, fabric down. So this is folded in half along the length of the fabric with your selvage edges together. That's just a fancy name for the outer edges. Okay, now what I'm going to do is make sure that we're roughly in half and even all the way through. Now, if you're a little bit uncertain, pin down your selvage edge to hold it together whilst you're marking up. I'm going to mark up without for the time being, but I may well put some pins in the corners before I start cutting. As you can see from this fabric, it's got a pattern in it. To ensure that the final item looks good, I'm going to pay particular attention to make sure my stripes match. Okay, now I'm going to mark up and cut out straight onto the fabric because I know what I need. Now if you were going to be wanting to repeat your cushions over different fabrics, you might want to do a paper pattern at this stage. Use any paper that's big enough. Obviously a spot and cross paper is ideal, but you can use newspaper, you can use really big sheets of tracing paper, or anything that's reasonably thin is the thing. Potentially even large sheets of tissue paper would work as well. Okay, but I do prefer to work straight onto the fabric. And you've got everything lined up. It's all smoothed out so that you haven't got any lumps and bumps underneath. And I can already see this is just moving slightly, so I'm going to have to, when I come to cutting, pin and take particular care that we are staying even on our patterns. So today we're making covers to fit a 16-inch square cushion. Now the general rule of thumb on cutting out covers for cushions is that you go a size down. So, or if you had cushion covers that were 16-inch, you would actually go up on your inner size. So I have cushions that are 16-inch, so ideally I need to be making towards a finished size of 14-inch. The reason for that is it makes your cushions really, really plump. If you want a cushion that's a little bit flatter, then you can go slightly the other way. Now, I happen to know, because I have a metre rule, that 16 inches is nearly 41 centimetres. Now, the way I'm going to do this today is I'm going to cut to that marker, and by the time I have taken all of my seam allowances in, it will be smaller than my cushion inner, so it will make a really plump cushion for me. So I want to cut mine 42 centimetres square. Okay. The other thing is I want to take note of the pattern in this fabric. Now, another thing that we could choose to do, but I'm not going to do today, would be to make it and use the fold of the fabric, because I want all of my cushions to match. But because of the way I want it to stay square and I want the pattern to stay true, I'm actually going to cut this as two pieces. Okay. The other thing is, before I even start marking up, I want to look at where this pattern is going to be positioned. And I want to pick up on these coloured blocks. So what I'm going to do is that's going to be my centre, so that from a design perspective we get the best looking cushions. So what I'm going to do is that's going to be my centre. So the middle of that particular pattern of blocks I need at 21. Now what that should mean is that on the edges at 42 I am evenly set on the pattern. So my first thing is to draw my first line. Now again, I'm going to use the pattern as my friend, and I'm going to use a straight line on the fabric, and I'm going to draw a line. It's as simple as that. And I'm going to draw the line initially a little bit bigger than I actually need. And what this does is it gives me my starting point. Now, I know that roughly I want to work out from the middle. Weirdly, that block measures not a full 4 centimetres, but 4 1/4, so I need to be just a little bit finicky to get that central. And when I'm happy that I've got that central, I'm going to do my right angles. Okay, so I'm going to start with that one, and then I'm going to flip so that this again is central on 21, and I'm lined up with my first line. So that's how we've got our first two right angles. So if you didn't have a nice metre square like I've got, you'd measure your 42 centimetres, put a little mark at each end, get your book or your record, put it on your marker. That's your right angle. So once I've got my right angles and I'm happy that I'm central, that my pattern's going to run nicely up, I'm then going to measure my 42 centimetres this way, because obviously we're making a square cushion. So what I'm going to do is mark 42 there, okay? And then this way, I'm going to draw a line with that at 42. So if I start the line that way, I know if I then square up this side, you can see my line matches perfectly, and I'm just going to carry it on. And there you go, we have got our first cushion cut. Now I'm not going to take you through cutting all the other four. What I will say is, what I now want to do is to repeat that pattern. I've got this where the dark line is at the bottom of a run of narrow lines. So what I want to do is make sure my next one is going to start in the same position. And it does mean we'll get wastage, but it means all of our cushions at the end will match. Okay, so you can see what I've done is put some pins in. Once I've measured everything up, and you can see I've got a gap between each cushion cover so that I can keep my continuity on my pattern. I've pinned strategic places so that my underneath doesn't move as I'm cutting, because I need the back and front to match for my side stripes to match perfectly. It's all about the cutting when it comes to stripes. So because I've got everything positioned and in place, we're now going to cut, and I'm going to do generous cutting because I want to make sure that I've got just a little bit of movement if necessary to line everything up. So I have drawn in chalk, but I'm actually just going to cut to the outside of the chalk just to give me that little bit of extra leeway. Shears are a little bit blunt and could do with sharpening. Okay, I'm going to cut all the way to the end. Always makes life easier to cut in sections. So to get a nice smooth cut, whatever scissors you're using, wherever possible, open them as wide as you possibly can and do a full cut to almost closed. That will give you a nice smooth edge. I'm not doing them quite perfectly because my scissors are slightly blunt. But what you want is a smooth cut, you don't want jagged edges. I'm just going to fold that over, finish off this one. Okay, and when we turn it over, we've got our same pattern on the other side. Okay, so an extra little bit of word of warning. If you're like me, using a fabric with a strong pattern where you've cut it so that they're all lined up and even, keep them in a pile the right way up as you start to sew, so that you don't get to the end and find out that you've put the zip at the bottom and all the rest are at the top on one of them. So be quite methodical and logical now in the way that you actually work to make sure that you don't mess up as you're going along. Otherwise you'll be on picking and that's not much fun. Okay.